Hey YouTube, Tessa Fellow for a Wife here. This is intended to be like a catch-up since I haven't made a video in a few weeks. I have had things that I wanted to do, but unfortunately with the chaos of real life, I had to stay away from making content for a while. If you're someone who's seen me making comments in other YouTube videos, that's because I usually carry my cell phone with me and I'm able to do stuff while I'm on the run. Can't exactly do that with making videos though. So, yeah, let's go ahead and talk about the very first thing, which is... Sorry, my kid is here. He's watching something. But let's first of all talk about Labor Day weekend, which actually my kid relates to that. Usually during Labor Day weekend, I go to an anime convention that takes place in my neck of the woods. But this year, they've changed the weekend from Labor Day weekend to Halloween weekend. It had to happen as a result of booking changes. So what we did instead was we went to the Oregon Zoo. So as you can see in this picture, it is a bunch of fish. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the different types of fish that exist, this is mostly sturgeon, salmon, and trout. The first area that we went to at the Oregon Zoo focused on wildlife from the Pacific Northwest, so that also included condors, cougars, well, a cougar, actually. They only had one, at least that I saw. There was a bald eagle, which was pretty awesome. But I chose this picture to show because this is the best one that I was able to get. Unfortunately, the only camera that I had with me at the time was my cell phone, and my cell phone's camera sucks. But Little Man definitely enjoyed this area, especially when we got to the part with the cougar, because it's a giant-ass cat. My son likes cats. So, anyways, let's go ahead and move on to the next film I'm going to show you. Okay, so this is another one that's kind of hard to tell exactly what's going on, but as you can see, there's a red cap there. That's my son's head. We got to the lion's den finally, which you can kind of see to the, let's just say, northwest from where my son is at. There's a few lions right there, specifically lionesses. I don't think there was a single male lion there. But, yeah, by the time we got to this point where I thought that he was going to be the most excited, he was so freaking tired. He just didn't seem to care that much anymore, but he obviously did a little bit. He wanted to still see the lions, but we eventually found a place where he took like a half-hour nap and gave him a little bit of food to eat afterwards, so he felt a little bit energized after that. So the final thing that we looked at before we left was the elephant exhibit. As you can see here, we got kind of close. It's a pretty good-sized part of the park, just for the elephants alone. But then again, we're talking about a very large mammal here. My kid definitely did enjoy seeing them. I think, again, a lot of that's because of that nap he took. This is also the part that I was actually looking forward to seeing. That and the primate exhibits, which we didn't really get that much of a look at because, like I said, my kid was being kind of a fussy little guy. So, but yeah, we definitely had a lot of fun during the entire weekend. And I guess that's where I'm going to go ahead and leave it off here for Labor Day. Let's go ahead and talk about what I was going to discuss the following weekend. Colin fucking Kaepernick. Yes, I was planning on throwing in my own little bit to this whole discussion. Because as far as football goes, this seems to be the most important thing being discussed that has absolutely nothing to do with the actual fucking game. God. Anyways, there's a lot of people who are pissed off with him, and I've even heard some with the 49ers franchise in general over what he's doing. I mean, he's making an ass out of himself over something that's not even a real issue. He's buying into liberal media bullshit because he's kind of black-ish. And then there's the other side. The other side of the debate seems to want to make Colin Kaepernick look like a martyr for some sort of a cause, which I guess in one aspect that could be an accurate statement. I mean, his rights to free expression are being attacked by some people on the other side. Not most of us. Most of us are attacking the reasons, not the actions. But of course, let's face it, the liberal media and a lot of the libtards that follow it don't really understand that concept. President Obama being among them. So my overall opinion of the subject is, yes, I do find what he's been doing to be disrespectful and troublesome, but he does have the right to do what he is doing, and even for the reason that he is doing it. Even though I completely disagree. And guess what, Colin? That's what kind of thing happens in a country where you're not oppressed. You have the freedom to say and do what you want so long as you're not infringing upon somebody else's rights. Guess what? Nobody is infringing upon your rights. You may think they are, but they're not. You're not infringing upon my rights or the rights of any other Americans by being a self-entitled little douchebag. So go ahead. Seriously, go right ahead. And as this current image is showing everyone, yes, I do find what Colin's actions are to be more deplorable than anything that Tim Tebow has ever done. Even though he played for one of my least favorite teams and was lucky enough to lead them through a crappy division that year and a playoff victory, neither of which they would have deserved if it went for the concept of luck, which I hate saying that term, but it was in that case. You know, nothing Tim Tebow has done was worse than anything Colin Kaepernick has done. Well, at least this thing in particular. So, but you know, this is proof right here that there's something wrong with the liberal side of things. So, they don't have the priorities straight. I don't care if you believe in God or not. At least Tim Tebow has his priorities straight. Besides, we all know that the real reason why he's doing all this protesting bullshit is because he's being benched because his favorite receiver is Richard Sherman. Oh yeah, and congratulations to AJ Styles for finally winning a world championship that actually means something, even though he did it with low standards. But hey, at least he's finally won it. Alright, so now that we're up to speed, we're going to talk about something that's been pretty recent, and really all that it is it's an update of the Major League Baseball standings and what I think is going to happen for the remaining 13 or so games. So let's go ahead and take a look at the American League real quick. So even though there's only one division champion, which is over in the National League, congratulations to the Chicago Cubs, by the way, I honestly think that the current division leaders are going to be successful in winning all of their titles. I think that's a somewhat safe bet to make. The closest one to being, well, able to prove me wrong is actually here in the American League with the East. Boston has currently got a good lead against Baltimore. And actually later today, they're going to be starting a series against one another. If Baltimore is going to win the division, they have to win this series. It doesn't have to be a sweep, but I definitely think for an emotional boost as well as a momentum push, if you're someone who believes in momentum, Baltimore has to win this series. A sweep would definitely be ideal for them, but I honestly don't see that happening. As for winning the series as a whole, that's going to be pretty tough too. So I do see Boston winning the division. Texas, you know, my team is in this division, and right now is actually the closest threat to their shot at winning the title. But you know what? Texas is going to win it. Like what I said in the last video, I think Texas basically was in a situation where they were going to win it, even way back then. And they haven't lost their lead at all since that point in the regular season. As for Cleveland, you know, they've got a pretty good lead against Detroit, and I really don't see Detroit pulling off this one just because of how much of a stretch the two teams have with one another. It's a 7-game split. So, with that being said, looking at the wild cards, that's going to be a lot more fun and interesting, especially when you take a look at the fact that Seattle is hosting Toronto. Those two teams are right there in the thick of it. For my Mariners, if they are going to make it to the playoffs, they have to win this series. A sweep would be fucking amazing, but let's face it, Toronto's pretty good, and Seattle has had this tendency to choke when they shouldn't. So I do see Seattle going 2-1 in this series, but I don't see a sweep. A sweep would be amazing, but I don't see it happening. That being said, Baltimore and Toronto obviously heads-on favorites to make the wild card. Detroit's in a good situation to also pull off an upset. Houston could, in theory, as could the Yankees. However, everybody from the Yankees on down, I would not expect anything out of them at this point in time. So right now, I would say we're going to see Texas, and then I would actually say Boston is probably going to get number 2, with Cleveland getting 3. And as for the wild cards, I'm actually going to say Baltimore and Detroit at this point, which makes me feel a little bit sad because I picked Toronto to win the World Series in my last review. But in this case, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. So like I said, the National League currently has one division leader, and they're actually in a really good situation to not only clinch the number 1 seed, but as I had said in my previous video, regarding baseball anyways, they could very well get 100 wins. You know, they have 13 games, they just need 6 to do it, and yeah, I think they have that potential. They are that good, after all. So, as for the others, the Nationals have a pretty good lead on the Mets. It's an 8-game spread. I think they're going to do it. Could the Mets actually do a good job of making things closer? Actually, yeah, they probably could, especially since they're the number 1 wild card team. But I still think Washington is going to finally do it. As for the West, that's actually a pretty fun ride. The Dodgers have a 5-game lead over the Giants, and that one I'm a little bit iffy on as well. But you know what? I'm going to go ahead and still say that I think the Dodgers are going to do it, and they're going to remain in the third seed, as you guys can see here. I don't think anything's going to change in that regard, to be entirely honest. As for the wild card team, we've got a pretty good fight going on between the Mets, Giants, and Cardinals. Yes, technically the Marlins and the Pirates are close enough there to make them somewhat of an interesting potential, but to be entirely honest, they're going to need a miracle if they're going to actually be serious contenders at this point in the season. So really just look at either being the Mets, Giants, and Cardinals. We might even see a 6th unofficial playoff team this year with the National League, but I'm honestly not going to hold my breath for that. I'm going to say that the Mets get the 1st seed and that the St. Louis Cardinals get the 2nd. So to briefly go through how I see the playoffs going, first round, Baltimore is going to defeat Detroit in that 1-game series, which I think is kind of silly. Baltimore is then going to go to Texas, in which they will surprisingly beat the Rangers and move on to the ALCS. They will be facing their division rivals, Boston, who will successfully defeat Cleveland. And I kind of hate to say it just because I'm so fucking sick of seeing it all the time, but I think Boston is going to win it. They will go on to the World Series again. As for the National League, we're going to see the Mets hosting the Cardinals and defeating the Cardinals, only to travel to Chicago and get absolutely destroyed by the Cubs. As for the other end of things, the Dodgers are going to successfully defeat Washington, even though the Nationals will have the higher ranking. Dodgers versus Cubs. That's going to be a very fun series with the Dodgers coming out in a surprising victory, making a lot of people probably really pissed off, I would imagine. So Dodgers versus Red Sox for the World Series, and despite home field advantage going to Baltimore to Boston, I'm actually favoring the Dodgers to win it all this year. So I'm sure a lot of people would disagree with me on that, especially if they were to agree on who's going to be into the World Series. But you know what? I don't care. This is my opinion, and feel free to rebuttal that if you want to. So as for the rest of y'all, my next video, I am hoping to do something a little bit more single subject related and more detailed and whatnot. I'm actually working on a couple of different things right now, one of which definitely feeds into the whole geekiness. Another one is a lot more politically oriented. But in the meantime, I will see you guys later and enjoy the rest of what YouTube has to offer.
Well?
Well, what?
Well, what now?
Yeah, I don't know. Oh, why don't you sit there for a couple hours while I figure it out?
Okay.